Hello and welcome to Bum Knives, the channel dedicated to motivating you to do something creative with whatever resources you may have. My name is Chris. I'll be your knife bum along this journey. Let's get ready to bum it up. Let's get some liquid motivation in us, and then we can get ready to start this project, the making of a friction folder. I don't have a lot of fancy equipment, but I'm not going to let that stop me from creating something cool, and you shouldn't let it stop you either. We need to come up with the look for our knife. In order to do this, you could use an app like Sketchbook and come up with your own designs, or you could just browse the web and find pictures of knives that you like and print those out. That would work as well. I'm certainly not the best artist, but if you guys are interested, let me know in the comments down below and I could do a tutorial for you one day, or at least how I do it first for this knife. I have already started making this knife before I decided to do a tutorial for you guys. So I do have two of the handle scales already pre-formed and pre-cut out. The piece on the left is just a piece of mild steel that you could find at any hardware store. I find that they make excellent knife handle scales. It was from a knife project that I had started years ago, but I had decided not to use it. And I thought it would be perfect for this project. And it was already cut out and ready to go. The piece on the right is obviously from a computer motherboard. I've used those in the past to make the actual handle scales. They make phenomenal design elements for your handle scales to be the actual scale. But in this case, we're just going to be using it as the frame for the other side. The only reason I used that instead of another piece of steel was because it's very sturdy, will hold up, and it's much easier to cut out for the shape. I scavenged the computer motherboard from an old broken printer. That is a great way to get your materials and stuff, just using anything old that you have, and that's what makes a great bum knife. Just repurposing something from something that you had in the past that may be broken. I used the steel handle scale that I already had cut out and laid it over top of the computer motherboard and simply used a marker to draw around it to sketch. When I was laying it out like this, I tried to pay careful attention to holes already in the motherboard. And I used that to line up the pivot hole that I wanted. If we go back to the original handle scale picture, you'll notice a little piece of wood that was basically just a piece of oak from firewood that I had. Also a piece of copper that was just from a scavenged piece of old plumbing, copper pipe plumbing that I had put into a clamp and flattened out, and a nice piece of carbon fiber. A few years ago, I picked up a sample pack of the carbon fiber piece that came with a bunch of other pieces. I had got it from a company called Rockwest Composites. Not sponsored by Rockwest, but shout out to Rockwest if you guys do hear this and decide you want to sponsor somebody. I'm your man. Again, I have the piece of copper from an old piece of plumbing and the piece of carbon fiber. The copper I put in the bench vise and just flattened. Now I'm just laying them on the liner of the computer motherboard and gluing them together with JB Weld. Okay guys, after the JB Weld is dried, we're going to head over to the portable bandsaw. I picked this up at Harbor Freight for a pretty good value. If you don't have one, you certainly don't need one to make a bum knife. You could certainly use a flap disc on an angle grinder would work just as well. Okay, so the other side, this mild steel handle side, we want to add a lot of interest and texture to it. So you could do any number of things to add interest to it, make it look really cool. For this, I just decided to drill a bunch of small holes. Okay guys, I just want to say thanks for watching if you've made it with us so far. Like I said at the beginning, I don't have a lot of equipment, so I can't give you the great shots of like drilling and sawing and stuff like that because I'm basically filming with one hand as I go. Thank you. Okay, now it's time to start talking about the blade. For this particular knife, I'm using 1084 carbon steel. I highly recommend this still, as it's probably the easiest to heat treat at home if you're going to be heat treating your own knife. I've made quite a few friction folders over the years, but one of the problems with friction folders is that, generally speaking, the handle's going to fold back and you're going to hit a stop pin, and because of that, the part that sticks out above the handle usually looks rather awkward and kind of ugly. So what I want to do is I'm just going to show you guys something that you might be able to incorporate into your friction folders to make them look a lot more cool. Okay, coming up next, we have a picture of a knife I made quite a while ago. A friction folder, like I said. The issue is the backstop pin and the way the handle sticks out above the handle. You can see how ugly it is on this knife. Now, it could have a lot to do with poor backstop pin placement on my part, but there's ways we can get around this to come up with a cooler idea. I've included a more recent knife that I've made. You can see here what I did was I've just angled the part of the blade against the actual backstop spacer instead of using a backstop pin. The thing with friction folders is all you got to do is stop the movement backwards, and it's just as good as having a backstop pin. This blade, though, I'm actually going to use the thumb studs as a stop pin. Okay, now that we have the blade shape laid out, it's time to cut out our blade. I'm just going to use my angle grinder for this because I want to save the blade on my portable bandsaw. I really hope I'm able to inspire a lot of you other knife bums out there. Let's go out there and get it. Let's go out there and do it. Oh yeah, that's right. It's still 2022. But that's okay. We're going to stay positive and push through. Okay, at this point, I have the knife blade cut out. There's still a lot of burrs and stuff on it, so it's time to go clean it off. So I'm going to head over to my Harbor Freight 1x30 to get that done. You guys will probably notice and find it very interesting. I have my 1x30 modified. So my 1x30 belt sander, if you notice, I have the top of it chopped off. That gives me the ability to do curves and stuff, as you see in the video, and also do other types of grinds. Another modification that I've did to my grinder is I've placed it inside a plastic storage box. The top of the storage box, I've made a glass window so I can see what I'm doing, but also prevent any of the sparks or debris flying back at me. And the front is cut open so that way I can get my hands into the grinder to actually do the work. I don't know if you guys caught that clip I just put in a second ago, but this piece of bar stock is actually rather thick. So what I've did for my primary bevels is I've clamped it down, and I actually used the flat disc sander to help eat away a lot of the material before putting it on the 1x30 to do the primary bevels as well. Okay, now I'm drilling the hole for the thumb stud. The thumb stud is actually going to be what stops the blade from going all the way back. What I'm going to be using for the thumb stud is actually two upcycled motherboard standoffs. They happen to screw into each other perfectly, so they'll attach to each side of the blade. And then I'll be able to epoxy it in place. We will also need to cut off the other side of the thumb stud that has the threads on the other side, sand and finish once we get to that point. Okay, now it's time to think about a backspacer for our knife. There's all sorts of cool things that you could use, from wood to plastic to anything really. For this, I happen to have went through my supplies and found, I guess it's in, I don't even know what to call it, some sort of thumb screw. This was completely unintentional, but it just happened to fit perfectly into the liner of the computer motherboard that we're using for the inside part of the scale. Sometimes you just get lucky. Okay, once I have the back spacer into the hole that it fit perfectly into the scale, I just drilled a hole through it, through the liner, and then I drilled and tapped the hole for the screw that would fit into it perfectly, and then I removed that screw and basically did the same thing for the metal liner to make everything fit perfectly together. All right, that wraps up our first episode. Join us again next time where we'll be heat treating and finishing the blade. Please like and subscribe and share. Thank you. God bless.
Yeah.